Welcome to the Wingman Show. My name is Drew Brown, and my wingman, my man, the number one guy I know, Dr. Paul Thompson. What's up, brother? Welcome to the Wingman Show, where we're floating like butterflies and stinging like bees. Rumble, you two badass jet pilots, rumble. Welcome to the Wingman Show. My name is Commander Drew Brown. My wingman, my friend, the guy who always watches my six, is Dr. Paul Thompson. How are you, brother Paul?
I'm very good today, Commander Drew. It's good to see you. I'm wondering about your hat, though. You're Commander Drew, but you got 4 stars. So did you get a promotion that we don't know about?
Well, this is a 4-star Admiral hat off the USS Nimitz. And very few people can get this. And I guess you're not supposed to have it unless you're an admiral. But they called me Mr. Hookup on the USS Nimitz because me and the supply officer were tight, and I was able to get a couple things that other people couldn't get.
Okay, good.
All right. So let's start off this show with the quote. And we'll do quotes just to let everybody know, because my dad, Drew Bundini Brown, came up with the second most famous quote in the world, which was float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. So we always start off our shows with a quote. The quote I want to start off with is Dr. Paul's quote. Give me one from your pastor, Bill Atkins in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah, Pastor Bill Atkins in Memphis, Tennessee said this some years ago, and I never forgot it. And it's profound, it's simple, it's elegant, but it's very profound. And it goes like this: live until you die, but don't die while you're still living. Live until you die, but don't die while you're still living. Think about it.
Wow, excellent. A lot of people do that. They're dead even though they're walking around. Very good. Let me give my quote of the day, and that's early to bed, early to rise, work all day and advertise. Early to bed, early to rise, work all day and advertise. And that's by Ted Turner. And I push that into my children's head almost every day. Early to bed, early to rise, work all day and advertise. And the advertise part it's important because even though you're doing real good, let somebody know you're doing well if nobody's recognizing it.
Right, right.
Nobody's patting you on the back, pat yourself on the back. All right, everybody. Thank you once again for watching, listening to the Wingman Show. This is part 2 of Who in the Hell are Wingmen Anyway? Dr. Paul and I are 2 black Navy jet pilots. And if you're watching YouTube, I wouldn't have said black because you could see that. We talked about our formative years in Harlem, New York, Queens, New York, growing up in high school and going to college. And before I go any further, I just want to make this point in case I didn't say it last show. The big thing about college is I didn't have a choice to go to college. So I had a college degree. When I became 26 years old and I did a whole bunch of things in my life, but I had 2 children now, I was married and I needed a job. I grew up at that point, but when I grew up, I had a college degree. So that means when I wanted to be what I wanted to be one day, I had the choice of everything. Without that college degree, my choices were limited. So God bless it. That's why I have pushed college so hard my entire life. All right, Dr. Paul, out of the University of Pittsburgh, where you came from, tell me how you got into AOCS. And for everybody out there, the acronym means Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, all you have to do is watch An Officer and a Gentleman, and they'll show you a little bit about what we went through. But Dr. Paul, tell me about your AOCS experience and how you got there.
AOCS, again, my path was not a straight line, and it wasn't jagged, but it had a lot of curves and twists. You said I had no idea what that even meant. I was in Air Force ROTC for a number of years, left that program, was told I could come into the Navy, but you got to go through AOCS. What is that? You just said it. Aviation Officer Candidate School. It's changed differently. It's changed now. It's not the same. It's not in Pensacola anymore. Didn't they close that a few years ago?
Yes, they did, Paul. I'm sorry to say. And I don't think a Navy jet pilot can be trained without going through AOCS in Pensacola.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a certain type of grit that you need to have, physical and mental and everything, because you're really put to the test and given opportunities to quit like every second, you know.
No, no doubt. Paul, tell me, what was your first impressions of AOCS when you first got there?
My first impressions were okay, this is the real deal. I did have through the Air Force ROTC, I did have a little bit of military experience. It wasn't my first go round, but this was much more aggressive, maybe by like a factor of 10. What I do now is it was the Air Force was really relaxed. As I look back, it was extremely relaxed. It's about as relaxed as I am right now. Starting AOCS, no, it wasn't at all. And it was, you're in for kind of a treat. Do you remember when you got in there? It's maybe this happened to you. You get in there and they yell at you. You sit down. And, I remember the first words I recall, which was great. One of the gunnery sergeants got up and said, "The easy life is over. On your feet." And I think the lieutenant who's in charge of everybody came in and he made an address. And after that, all the fun started, as they would say. But do you remember that when you sat down, they would say, "Take a look to your left, take a look to your right. The person you're looking at will not be there in X number of weeks." They ever say that to you?
Oh my God, do I? Well, different than you, I had no idea about the military. I had no clue of what I was getting into. I just wanted to be an airline pilot, and this was the road that I had to take. So when I first got to AOCS in Pensacola, I was very excited, and we all got into a classroom, and I was with a bunch of guys. And as always in my Navy career, they were all white guys, and all these guys were college educated and always wanted to fly. So there was a lot of chatter. I kind of felt out of place because I knew nothing about nothing. And I remember the lieutenant was the first person who came into the room, and he gave us a nice little speech. And, everything was really cool. And he says, "Well, I'm now going to send in your gunnery sergeant." And I was like, "Okay, send him in." And all of a sudden, through that door, Paul, came Gunnery Sergeant Clark. Gunnery Sergeant Clark changed my life. But let me tell you what he first said when he walked in that room. He said, "Let me tell all of you son of a bitches one thing. One of you are going to quit right now. DOR. That's drop on request. Every class I had, somebody quit right in the beginning. You have two choices, fellas. You can go home looking like a penis when your head is shaved tomorrow, or you can go home today. Make a choice." And I'm looking around like, why would anybody want to quit? And I swear, Dr. Paul, a guy raised his hand and said, "I'm out of here." That's how rough Gunnery Sergeant Clark was in his initial appearance to us, Paul. So I'll never forget that. All right.
Yeah,
So what happened? You became, they call it a poopie. What did you think
pooping.
about being a poopie in AOCS? That's your first couple of weeks, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. First, I was wondering why they called it that. I remember you wore like a chrome helmet. It looked goofy and dark green heavy fatigues, which was the last thing you really needed because the temperature down there was like 98 most of the time, and you're wearing this heavy cotton stuff. I mean, like even the LA gang members probably don't wear that heavy stuff in that hot weather. But and they PT and just to see who's gonna quit. You're overheated the whole time initially. So it was initially a shock to your system. So now you say you knew nothing about the military.
Zero, 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 zero. Matter of fact, Dr. Paul, when I was a poopy, do you remember seeing the little guys with the khaki uniforms, like at the just all over, just standing guard or something? I
Yes.
thought they were the coolest looking guys in the world because they really roughed us up. The first time I met Gunnery Sergeant Clark after we moved into Battalion 2, which I believe you went to also, which
Yeah,
is kind
that
of
too.
cool.
That too. Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that too. Well, the very first morning, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, black as hell. he came into our area banging these garbage cans loud as hell, saying, "Get up, get up. You have 5 minutes to be downstairs. Get on, get up." And I mean, just crazy. So we all get up and we're in our skivvies, which means our underwear. We're all standing in the front there, like thinking we're at attention. And he walks right up to me and he says, "Come here, you big black son of a bitch." And I looked at him and it was 1981. I was like, I didn't think you could say stuff like that anymore. It was kind of like funny, but it wasn't funny. And he said, "Oh, you don't like me saying that? Do you want me to call Jesse Jackson? Oh, Jesse. Or do you want me to call Dr. Martin Luther King? Dr. King, Dr. King." And he continued to make fun of me like that. He never said black again, but he just wanted to know, which I found out later, was I going to be deterred by racism? That's what he was checking out. But also, Paul, and I think you'll love this, I'm 6'5" and black. Everybody else looks like they're 5'10" and white. I was the only one that he could remember my name, how I looked, and he could really focus on trying to break me down. But in that, every other guy on that line was scared to death. They were shitting in their pants because they said, if he's going to go mess with that big dude, what is he going to do to me?
Right. Not unusual. Not unusual. Didn't have that experience, but a friend of mine did too. Same deal. A couple of them. Yeah, that can happen because what they're trying to do is to establish order and kind of hard discipline right at the very very beginning to get things straight, and then after I will call it the initial hazing period, learning begins, training actually begins. You're actually being trained the whole time. Even when you're being punished, you're actually being trained. How to eat, how to do this, how to do that. I remember initially you couldn't eat, how to get up, put your tray down and all this other stuff, and I was, not sure what I should eat. And guys was screaming, "You need to put more food on that tray. You need to put more food on that tray." Because he knew he was going to run us to death. So they're actually looking at your nutrition, which I thought about that years later. I said, we're really looking out for you, even though it looks like they're on you. They are on you, but it's in a good way, but it's an aggressive way. But there's a point to what they're doing. You have no idea what they're doing. You basically have to go with the program, go with the flow.
Let me ask you this, Paul. There was a lot of physical conditioning. They made us run in the sand with our rifles. One time I asked God to give me a little mini heart attack so I wouldn't get kicked out of the program, but let me fall down at least. I was so tired. And the gunnery sergeant, he stepped every time we ran, he ran also, except he didn't sweat, it looked like. But how was your physical conditioning in the Navy?
It was, and I showed up there in pretty good shape. Could have been better. I didn't know as much. I was going to like a Y for YMCA in Jamaica, Queens, off Parsons Boulevard, shorts there. That's the story in itself. I was there for about off and on for like about 5-6 weeks. So I was swimming and doing different things, and that definitely helped. But it was not near, the intensity of what someone can push you to do, especially when if the humidity is like 10,000% and the temperature is like 99.5 all the time. That's different. So I adapted. Initially it was kind of hard. After a couple of weeks, I was doing okay. And most of the class was too, actually. It was a shock to everybody. So there was a couple guys who were prior enlisted, which was very interesting. And they had a different perspective on things and say, yeah, this is a little harder than what we did in the Air Force way back when. So we kind of leaned on other people who had experience. That helped too. Because a lot of stuff I knew, but there's a lot of stuff I didn't know either. So I always had my ears open to listen to other people.
Well, this is what Gunnery Sergeant did to me. I remember I had kind of a fight with a guy. I just didn't like this guy, Paul Newman. I'll never forget. That was it.
The
Paul.
actor?
Somebody.
The act?
No, no, no. His last name was Newman. I don't remember his first name. But anyway, we had like almost a fist fight. And the gunnery sergeant came and instead of breaking it up, he told us, well, now we are new roommates. And I had to live with that guy for the rest of the time there. But I was an athlete, remember? I played for the Globetrotters for one day, but I was a college athlete. I went to school on a basketball scholarship. I was captain of my basketball team at Southern University. So I used to be in shape. But then I told you I went out to Las Vegas and had all this fun. So I kind of came in as a fat body and was out of shape. But boy, did they whip my ass into shape, Dr. Paul. I was in the best shape of my life when I finished. It was 16 weeks of this. Tell me about the studies you had, because I remember there was meteorology, there were engines, and then there was aerodynamics. How was your schooling? Because it was hard.
That was the easiest part for me. I actually kind of halfway went to sleep, to be honest with you, because I had been doing that, the previous years at way levels way beyond that. I could draw all the charts and the diagrams versus, a lot of guys who maybe was a music major or something like that. And they're just like, so what I actually did at night, I actually, a couple people, I would tutor them because the only time you had that was like at night for a little bit before you went to sleep. So I would tutor and, they were kind of sweating and stuff. Cause yeah, at that time, I went in a little before you did. It's only like a half a dozen things you had to know. It wasn't very much. You're not getting a PhD in natural physics or something like that to talk about the basic, way an engine works and, know the answers. That would help. And I think everybody passed it. So I didn't have any problem with it. Again, I had the private pilot's license. So I knew a little something about airplanes and I knew a good bit about engineering. So that's the only area that was my easiest phase, I will say.
Wow. It was very difficult for me
Yeah.
because I was a business major. And
Right.
for everybody out there who can hear my voice, don't fool around in school. It will catch up to you. And I knew nothing about aerodynamics. I didn't even know how to spell aerodynamics, I used to say. Meteorology and engineering. You're an engineer. So all of that came kind of good, quick to you. It was very hard for me. And I worked my ass off to learn all this new stuff. And
Right.
remember, you had to learn in a military fashion. They were
Right.
on you. It wasn't easy breezy. You had certain time you could study, a certain time you had to go to class. You had to march to class, march from class. It was pretty to me it was very intense, very intense, Paul.
Now, as you say that, there is one thing I just recalled. There was one thing I had difficulty with, but I did find it challenging because I knew nothing about it. You didn't know stuff about sailing. I had no sailing, but sailboat background at all. So the, luff, leach, tack, and all that other stuff. I remember you had to learn those terms for a while, the nautical rules of the road and things like that. I had no experience in boating. So I did have to study a little bit on that. That was not instinctive.
Wow. Paul, remember I said he picked on me? Well, he only picked on me for the first maybe 3 or 4 weeks out of a 16-week program. And then when he found out all the weaknesses of all my fellow classmates, he left me alone. He left me alone. And matter of fact, I became his favorite student. Not that he ever said anything. But tell me about this, because we went in something called the Helo Dunker. Do you remember that? Well, we had to do our water training. We had to swim underwater for a certain amount of time. We had to swim for a certain amount of time. And when I first got in that pool, I remember 5 or 6 enlisted personnel coming over to me because they thought black people couldn't swim.
Mhm.
And I was able to swim like a fish, but I won't ever forget that. But we had to do the Dilbert Dunker and the Helo Dunker, and both of them. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the Dilbert Dunker, Dr. Paul?
Yeah, the Dilbert Dunkers was kind of fun. Now, when I went to, they didn't have a Helo Dunker. I've heard of that. Didn't have a Helo Dunker. We did the Dilbert Dunker. And you might see it in the movie Officer and Gentleman. It's the only movie I've seen it in, where the guy goes down. Basically, it's kind of like a sleigh ride into the water, into underneath water. And you're kind of strapped in, you get pushed underwater, you get rotated upside down. You have to free yourself, unlatch yourself, swim clear, and swim to the surface and survive. It's fairly simple. Most of it's kind of a psychological thing with the sound of the ratcheting the Dilbert Dunker itself up. It's kind of like a scary movie kind of ratcheting sound. But the thing itself, it's you're in the water for 2 or 3 seconds. You swim clear, and there are divers under there in case you get in trouble, so you don't drown. Because that has happened, and you come to the surface. So if you've never done it before, it's different.
Well, I
Tell
said
me
that.
about the Helo dunker. I didn't experience that.
Well, you said you didn't even do the Helo Dunker because they didn't have it there. Well, I almost flunked out actually because of the Helo Dunker. So the Helo Dunker was like a big round can with holes in it that were windows that simulated windows and one door. And I think five of us sat in there. We had to buckle in, we had to sit down. And what the drill was is when you got to the bottom, you had to count to 10 and then go out the door one at a time. So you had to unbuckle and do all that. Well, that wasn't so bad. The next time we went down, they flipped it upside down. So now water's trying to shoot up your nose. You still have to unbuckle and you still have to go out the door one by one. The last one is which is the one that I almost flunked out of, Paul. Paul, they blindfolded you. I was blindfolded, upside down, strapped into this Helo Dunker, counting to 10 to wait for other people to leave so I could take my turn and got out. The problem is, I'm from Harlem, Jack, and I want to survive. I was the first one out every single time. I think I counted like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down. And I had to do it 5 times. They finally said, if you don't stay down there and wait for everybody to come out, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. And on that last one, I said, to hell with it. I'll just drown if I have to. And I went in, flipped upside down. I was blindfolded and I counted to 20, I think, which was probably only 7 or 8. And I finally got out and I was the last one to get out and I made it. But
Let
one
me,
scary thing, I never was upside down, blindfolded, strapped in
well, let me ask you, why did you have to be the last one?
because of my seat.
Oh, okay.
You started off in one seat and you rotated seats. So the last seat I was in, I happened to be the last one that was able to go out. I was the furthest from the door. And that's
Uh,
why I was the last one. But I made it. I made it. So tell me this, Dr. Paul, after all of that, do you remember you got ranked in AOCS and you used to get bars for your last week because you were a big shot there? It was like being a senior in high school or a senior in college. You were the man for that last week. You could go out, you could have fun. It was an incredible time. But you also were ranked by, I guess, your
your
fellow
peers.
classmates.
I can't remember that. Yeah. Uh, that's a military thing too. I also remember that in even in ROTC at the summer camp, Air Force ROTC, they had a ranking system. Uh, yeah, I don't have big memories of that. It was nothing bad, but there was a ranking system, and the thing about being a candidate officer or whatever, that was pretty good. You were actually a human being and a citizen, and actually took part in training other people coming in, which was weird. The inmates start really literally start running part of the asylum. You know,
Yeah, but remember when you first got there, how you looked at those candidates like they were generals or admirals.
yeah,
They were like the biggest things going.
they were the biggest thing going. They're just like 2 months ahead of you. But the transformation is that quick. It seems like, gee, they must have been here 5 years. No, they've been here like 5 weeks, whatever it was.
Six
You have no rights at all, and then you can do this, you can do that. They can go out on the town and come back at a certain time, and they're not harassing you. They're talking to you like a normal person, and you're actually working with the DIs in some cases. Close to commissioning.
Well, what I did was they had ranks from 4 bars to 1 bar. And this is where some of the racism started with my classmates and everything. They truly didn't kind of like me some of the time, some of them, I should say. And I was ranked with 1 bar. So you had to walk around with your khakis with 1, 2, 3, or 4 bars. Obviously, the top guy had 4 bars and he wore his khakis all the time. So you could see that.
Mhm,
The thing I did, I took negatives and made them positives.
mhm.
On your white uniforms, you didn't have any bars, so they couldn't tell where you were ranked. And for that whole week, all I wore was my white uniform.
That's true. I think I had 3 bars. I think.
You probably did.
I think so.
You probably
I
did.
was
So tell me about when you finally graduated. when you saluted your gunny? How was that?
That was great. I just wish the photography was a little bit better. I think my mother snapped some pictures and they're kind of in focus, out of focus. Nothing like you could get out of an iPhone today. But that was a strange feeling because I never really looked at him that much. And I looked at him one time and I think, I even wonder now if we were the same age, he might have been like a year older. He could have been a year younger. He was younger than the other people. And
That was that was an advantage I had. I was 26. I was the oldest one there as far as my other classmates, and I knew something that this was just a game.
right,
Deep in the back of my head, I realized that this is a game. They're not trying to kill you, even though it seemed like it, but this
right,
is just a game. And that really helped me a lot. But I remember when I saluted my gunnery sergeant Clark, the tradition is to give him one silver dollar, salute him, and then you become an officer, and he actually salutes you.
yeah,
Well, when I got to Gunny, I gave him two silver dollars, one for my dad, who got kicked out of the Navy when he was 13 because the officer called him a nigger. He threw him over the side of the ship and he got kicked out of the Navy. He didn't go to jail because he was only 13. But point being, I gave him two silver dollars, one for my dad and one for me. And it was one of the proudest moments in my life when my gunnery sergeant saluted me. To this day, Paul, though, I won't ever be bigger than Gunnery Sergeant Clark.
yeah. I mean, that's a huge person. I don't know how big he was physically. That's
I didn't mean in size.
yeah, 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 yeah. Right. Just in terms of the effect they have on your life, even to this point. I mean, look at what we're talking about. Even as we're grandparents.
That's true. He got promoted after I left to first sergeant, right? I didn't like that name. I didn't like first sergeant. Gunnery sergeant to me was bigger than an admiral. That's how much of an impact he had to me. So
Yeah,
I used to call him gunnery. I used to say, "No, Gunny, can't you be a gunny?" He said, "Well," and this is when I was a lieutenant JG. He said, "Yes, Ensign Brown," meaning he put me back too. So
yeah, 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 yeah. That's true.
anyway, so from AOCS, believe it or not, it is time to learn how to fly an airplane. Tell me about your experience when you left AOCS, because you left on top of the world and you go right back down to the bottom. Tell me
Yeah.
about the flying. Where did you go?
I went to Whiting Field. Whiting Field was about 30 miles away from Pensacola, thereabouts, maybe a little bit less. And that was a very interesting experience. Flew the T-28. It was a lot to learn in a short time. I did very, very well. The previous flight experience helped me out quite a bit, even though I had a Marine captain who was my instructor, and he just kind of screamed at me the whole time. He just screamed, "Oh, this, do this, do this." Well, I didn't know, but I had real good grades. And he said, "You're this." He said, I remember one time he said, "Getting you through this program will be the toughest assignment of my military career." And he was saying all kinds of stuff. But I would get back and he would be like a normal person. And and next thing I know, I get jets and I'm out and I'm gone. That was just it. Again, that hazing doesn't really stop. Okay, you did the thing with the guy on the ground. Now Gunny Clark may have had no aviation experience, doesn't know anything. Now you got someone else who does have the AV experience. They're going to do the same thing in the airplane. You're going to be challenged. Maybe harder, maybe a lot harder.
Probably a lot harder, Paul.
Probably harder. Yep.
I think it's real important for everybody to know we were trained by Marines. I feel very close to the Marine Corps. But I was trained, gunnery sergeant, all of our drill instructors were Marines. That's not true anymore. And there's nothing like getting trained by a Marine DI drill instructor, just nothing.
When I was playing guitar, my teacher was a Marine drill instructor. I think he's one of the Montford Marines, and he did this. It was the same deal. I was a teenager, so I was a little familiar with some of it. I was familiar with some of it. He was
Wow.
saying,
Well,
Mr. Jones, Robert Oliver Jones, a jazz guitarist.
how
Teacher.
cool is that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, what happened to me is I knew nothing about flying. Unlike you, Paul, I didn't have a private. private pilot's license, I'd never even been inside of a cockpit like that. So that's how far back I was. So they asked me when I went through, they also had T-34s, which was the newer model of a trainer, primary trainer for you. And the T-34, I asked them with a lot of seriousness, which one is harder to fly, the T-34 or the T-28? And they said, no doubt, it's the T-28. This is one of the proudest moments of my life because I picked the T-28. I said, if I'm going to learn how to fly, I want to learn how to fly on the hardest thing that there is. And I went to Corpus Christi to fly T-28s.
Well, there's a lot to be said about that. Congratulations to you. I think I don't know if I mentioned it last week or before, but you know they used to call the T-28 the ensign eater because the T-28 was what you would do after the T-34. You went right to the 28 just as I did too, because they got at that point they actually got rid of the T-34s there. They had grounded them there. Everybody's on T-28s, and people were getting kicked out of the program all the time. They had flown before, and that kind of got me. I've seen these guys they're just walking away. They're walking down, and they've flown the T-34, and they're flunking out from the T-28. And I'm starting the T-28. I'm saying, boy, I got to get my stuff together because these guys, I had most of them were Marines and they had to go through the PLC, the ground course. They did a lot to get there, and they're getting bounced out left and right. And that was an attention getter. And I studied very, very, very hard, much harder than in college, much harder than in engineering school. If I had applied myself in engineering school the way I did in flight training, I probably would have finished that degree in about 2 years,
Me too. No
easily, and done well.
doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, focus was there. Because we were not, there's no playing around. Zero. There's no
Let
playing.
me ask you this, Paul. Out of all the people, how many people did you start off with, and how many people did you actually graduate with?
Well, and if you're talking about AOCS,
AOCS.
I think there was close to 40, maybe 38 or something like that. And as I recall, there were 31 that graduated. I remember 31, and as of a few years ago, most were still living, with the exception of like two or three. Uh,
And everybody out there needs to know this. It's one out of 100,000 people who are qualified physically and mentally to fly a Navy jet. So the people who went there in the beginning were all very qualified to do it. So there weren't a bunch of bumps. I had like 45, and I think I graduated with 20 something.
okay. That,
But
not
these
un-
are guys who wanted to fly their whole life.
Right, right, right. And, you have people who knew things. I remember one guy in the class, his father was an admiral. And again, wow, he had all kinds of information. He had so much information I really couldn't handle it. He knew a little bit too much. I always say it's good to know people that know stuff, but if you but if you can't handle what they're telling you, it's not much good. So basically, you've got to experience a lot of things yourself.
Well, the first time I got into an airplane cockpit and I saw all those buttons and gauges, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, to myself, I was like, "I can't do this. This is no way I can remember all this stuff." And every airplane I ever flew, it always started off that way, and in 6 months, I always said, "Hey, is there any more knobs and buttons to play around with?" So every one that I thought I couldn't do, I worked my ass off and became very proficient in that. How about my first solo? And that was in Fallon, Nevada, believe it or not. Remember we used to take debts out to Fallon, Nevada?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember Fallon. Oh,
Well, I soloed out there. And remember, they cut your tie. Anyway, I could not believe I was about to take off in an airplane all by myself. I got pretty comfortable with an instructor back there, but this is the very first time a loud ass, strong, powerful T-28 Trojan I am taking to the runway, and I'm about to take off all by myself. An amazing feeling and accomplishment.
yeah, that is a very it's a very personal experience. It's just you. It's everything you learn, but it's you and yourself, and everything that's gotten to that point. And you have time to think and reflect and look down and follow your procedures. And there's no one holding your hand. You're holding your own hand, and you're able to do that. So your confidence in life just arises. I think anybody that solos an airplane at any age, that's a natural human reaction. If you're 16 or 60.
Wow. When you finished primary, remember we had a choice. It was jets, props, and helos. And from the very beginning, I always wanted to fly props because that was your quickest route to an airline pilot because you had to fly big planes that were multi engine. And that was the kind of flying time the airlines required. So, do you remember when you came up to, you got to pick, and it was the Navy's needs first, but you got to pick jets, props, or helos? What did
Yeah.
you pick, Paul?
I remember I picked jets. I remember there's a little card you filled out. It's like an index. I assume it's like an
Yep,
index card.
yep.
The index card you filled out, and I put in. That's all I wanted. And I got jets, and I get kind of pulled out like right away. Whatever point they make that decision. And next thing I know, I said, "Okay, you're out of here. You're going to Kingsville, Texas. Where's that?" That's
Wow.
very different, but
Well, I put on mine. I didn't think I was going to get jets, to be honest with you. But I used to watch those F-14s, and they are the baddest ass jets I've ever seen in my life back then. They overcame the F-4 that I thought was the baddest airplane. Anyway, I put down jets, props, helos, and I didn't believe I was going to get jets. And all of a sudden, when it came time, they told me I got jets. I could not freaking believe it. And we're going to stop right there. I want to let everybody know thank you so much for all the support you have given us. Thank you for watching us on YouTube and Instagram and listening to us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all the other ways that you can watch and listen to us. And remember, you can go to our website, which is wingmenshow.com. That's wingmenshow.com. And on our website, this week, we're going to have a newsletter. And that newsletter is going to be going back to school as an adult. How to go back to school as an adult. That's our newsletter. But we also have something called a frequent flow line where you can ask Dr. Paul and myself any question you'd like, and we will try to get to it during the show. So, Dr. Paul, the gouge. The gouge we used to say in the Navy was shit you need to know, but it looked like nobody ever told you. And the gouge this time for this show is going to be education. And I started off talking about education, but it is the one thing that no matter where you were born, how you were born, what you look like, if you work your ass off and get an education, the world is yours. Yes, I am black, and yes, it was hard, and I'm Jewish and it was hard and all that BS, but it really wasn't. It was what I put into it, is what I got out of it because I didn't have an excuse not to make it. And I guess I always knew that I had to take care of my family, my children, and my wife. And so I could not flunk out of this program. But education is what got me to where I am. What do you think about education? What's your gouge, Paul?
well, that's where it starts. And again, what you just said, you had purpose, and purpose is important. It's feeding your family and taking care of yourself, and maybe feeding your soul. Yeah, you need education, college, training, the modern world we're in. You got to learn switches and knobs and other facets of life too, just to operate your iPhone if you have an iPhone or some phone. So that's a part of our training. So get used to, you just have to have a good attitude towards learning, period. And the other stuff will flow. But it begins with your attitude towards it.
And my formula for success, and I put it in my book, my book was called You Gotta Believe, but under it, the subtitle was Education plus hard work minus drugs equals success and the American dream. And I still believe that today. Education plus hard work minus drugs equals success and the American dream. For everybody out there who can hear my voice, anything that you think is important, and anything that you think is beautiful, and most importantly, anything that makes you happy, may you have that today and forever. I pray for peace.
Cameraman Drew, I also pray for peace. And to all those who listen, like, and share our message, we appreciate you. Please become a subscriber. It helps the algorithm on YouTube. Hit that bell icon, and you'll get a notification when we put out a new episode. Stay positive and keep flying straight.
Thank you once again, Dr. Paul Thompson, my friend. Thank you for your love, your time, And that's something that we won't ever get back. I want to thank all the listeners, too. Thank you so much for doing the show, Dr. Paul. We're jamming.
Well, thank you, Mr. Drew, for inviting me on. Always good to talk to you. And ladies and gentlemen, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast or any of the podcasts. If you're looking at YouTube, they say smash the like button. Don't smash it. Just press it gently and refer to use as a link to all your friends. You can also look at us on our website, wingmenshow.com, WINGMEN show, SHOW.com, altogether, wingmenshow.com. And we hope to see you in the future. Thanks again, Mr. Drew.
Oh, you're welcome. And we're still floating like butterflies and stinging like bees. Rumble, you badass jet pilots, rumble. May there be peace on earth, and goodwill towards all men and women.